Thank you, and thank you everyone for coming here. Thank you, James, for looping me in even at the last minute. We're here with a very powerful panel to discuss about growth in a cooler climate. So what we'll try to achieve at the end of this discussion is for you to have some key takeaways that can bring some inspiration or maybe that you can implement straight ahead and hopefully bring growth to your business. So let's start by welcoming our panel, and it would be great if you could introduce yourself, say a couple of words about your business, and maybe what's the challenge today for your growth plans. And let's start from there. Maya, would you like to start?
Yeah, of course. Hi everyone, my name is Maya. I'm the head of growth for the Sole Supplier. When I say growth, I more mean like product and business strategy growth. I use data and user research for insights and to identify opportunities for growth. The Sole Supplier is the leading marketplace for sneakers and streetwear in Europe. We are also the second largest content affiliate after Money Saving Expert.
Wow, impressive.
So that's us. Our target audience is 18 to 35-year-olds, if that's helpful. So clearly a challenge at the moment is very much how do we navigate the cost of living crisis. And let's face it, even though technically it's not called recession, we've been in a recession for quite a few months now. So that's a challenge at the moment. How do we continue growing in this climate?
Indeed, and we'll talk more about that. Aaron.
My name's Aaron. I'm the head of growth at Swissclip. It's actually really interesting to hear what other head of growths do, because I think it's quite a made-up title, and you do whatever you want really and figure it out, and something at the end comes out. My role is definitely more operational focused, so it is everything and everywhere within the business, anything that can be optimized, whether that's financial or data or processual. My background, I spent 7 years working at the Hut Group in international expansion. So I did 4 years in the UK, 3 years in New York, launched businesses across Asia, Europe, and UK. And here I am in a startup. So we'll see how it goes. I might need a job next year.
Very good, a startup approach as well. So let's see, actually. Jake.
Hi everyone, I'm Jake. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Piglet in Bed. And we're a luxury bed linen brand, now sleepwear, homewares, and we're taking on every room in the home. And my remit really is all things acquisition, growth, and then right through to lifecycle marketing, retention, making sure they come back and not just fall out of this funnel, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about.
Excellent. So I'm going to start with an introductory question about how do you go about designing a strategy for growth? Where do you start from? Maya?
For me, it always starts with data and looking at your own data. So in a way, everything that I'm possibly going to tell you today, forget about it. Look at your own data, how your business grows, what's the target audience, what channels do they use, how do they use your website or app or however you're transacting. So it's all about looking at the data and then identifying the growth opportunities. Let's say, are you seeing an interesting kind of traffic spike from a different country that you are not actually servicing, or you're not thinking about that target audience? So for me, it's always about the data first.
So customer data and behavioral data?
Customer behavioral data, absolutely.
Any product data?
But that's what we mean when I talk about data. I certainly mean kind of customer data, behavioral data, how they use their websites as well. We run a lot of experiments, let's say, validating certain tests. So because all of us have an amazing well of ideas that are waiting in the backlog. Oh, this is going to drive growth. Well, let's test it quickly. So we use, let's say, something called a fake wizard, which is you very quickly introduce something new on your website and you see whether the users interact with it. So it could be just a button that does absolutely nothing except that you're tracking the usage. Are people using it? Or maybe they're interested in this new feature. Are they not using it? Maybe it's not worth developing it, for example. So it all starts with the data.
So you interrogate your data to find a truth about who's your customer, what they like, and how to approach it. What does a piglet do?
Yeah, I think when I first joined the business, tried to set out stall to see like how we're currently growing and what's set up. And I always like this analogy of, and I can't pass it off as my own, of the company like a race car. So if you think, what are all the component parts that make a car move? So you've got the growth engine. So what is the growth engine for the company? So there's usually, this may be up for discussion, but 2 or 3 sort of primary lanes of growth. You've typically got your ads, like media buying, or you might have like a well-oiled sort of content engine, or SEO will come into play in that as well. Partnerships, and then like virality, although I think virality is trickier as a D2C business because versus sort of SaaS or an app, because the more you use the product doesn't exponentially get better with use. So I don't think, I would argue, no one's truly found like virality unless a huge influencer's maybe posted about you. And then to also run the car, you've got like the lubricants, the oil, so it's all right chucking loads of traffic at a website, but actually what are you doing to affect conversion? You've also got the fuel, which is either the content or the capital to run ads. So they're sort of like the few component parts, I think, like which area should we be really strong in? And back to those sort of growth lanes, you don't need to be good at every single part. Like you might just be, for Piglet, like we were always really bullish on meta ads. Like that's our biggest demand generation channel. We're not competing at like point of purchase as much on paid search. We're luxury, high AOV. We're always going to get undercut by retailers that are not positioned like us. So it's like knowing which lane are you going to operate in and like do that one thing really well. So that's kind of the approach I've taken.
So before we dive into acquisition, because it's very interesting to see as the cost of acquisition has gone significantly up. So it's not only that your customers are going through uncertainty and they're being pressurized. Also, you have partners that they now need more in order to advertise your product. How would a startup be approaching the data starting point? Do you have enough data to know your customer, or do you need to start with assumptions?
I really like Maya's testing process here. We have something similar when we're trying to validate anything within a product or within an idea that we have. We will throw a couple of $1,000s at something, mainly operating in the US. Throw a couple of $1,000s at something to either a blank page or a dead page or a page that doesn't actually link anywhere, because we have an understanding of what happens after that point. We know the click-through rate and everything that follows. So from a data standpoint, at the beginning, yes, we're validating it with small amounts of money, especially on paid social. Fantastic way of testing new countries and new products and new theories, new ideas, new angles. But no, data is even in a startup, it's at the center of everything we do. I have a report, a link on the home screen of my phone, which is linked to a Google Data Studio dashboard that I look at probably the first thing I wake up every day. But everything is data first, absolutely.
Yeah, and my background is also in kind of startups as well. So when you don't have data, sometimes you can just talk to your customers and start with a qualitative assumption and then look for recurring themes. And then afterwards start, hypothesizing and trying to validate those. But the recurring themes tell you a lot about the user problems and what you should be focusing on, or is there an opportunity there as well?
So you test, you validate your assumptions, and then you go about and allocate your budget. Yeah. And then how would you go about, Jake, on prioritizing which channels you want to focus on for growth?
That's the goal. Yeah, that's the golden question. I think for us, we're more and more bullish now of trying to understand like which channel is going to yield like the most incremental value. So we know in a world now of, I don't know if anyone like buys media on Google, like Performance Max, paid search, and which we do too, but there's like a temptation to scale that loads, but the incrementality of it's probably not great versus Meta, which is still like it's becoming more and more black box, like how many net new users am I reaching on a daily, weekly basis? Like we know as targets for the week, month, year, like what's the new customer targets, and you can quickly see shifts based on if you flipped all your money into Google and dried up Meta, like market share is probably going to shrink. So it's about trying to understand what are we doing with our marketing mix, like how's that affecting the top line, sort of new user growth. And I'm sure I might come on about attribution, but it's really about trying to construct, or what we've tried to do, experiments. So if everything remains flat, which yes, there'll be seasonality and other variables, but if I increase this channel X% week on week, month on month, what happens at scale? Like that for me has been one of the most reliable ways to try and figure out attribution. It's not perfect by any means, but trying to construct experiments and change one thing at a time rather than like completely flipping the marketing mix on its head.
And how much period would you allow for a channel to prove its worth?
Yeah, I think it's tricky. It's a lot depending on how much you spend in for a start to get sort of significance, or at least spot patterns, trends, correlations, but like at least probably a month in our case, I would say. You probably won't get that much valuable insight by just changing something for a week, because you've also got like this ad stock effect that happens as well, especially on Meta. Like if, sometimes I found like what would happen if we turned off Meta tomorrow? Like that's not really a test I want to do. Like I'd rather someone else try that test. But it's probably still like fruition for a while, but that's because people have been served ads 2-3 weeks ago and they're still only just making the decision now. But it's going to be, okay, what happens in a month, 2 months to branded search? I can guarantee that's probably going to plummet.
Well,
yeah,
you said something a second ago about, in your last comment, about demand generation, right?
Yeah.
And I think this isn't something that people talk about enough. And what we're seeing, we've got demand generation versus demand capture, right? And demand capture is your PPC and your search. People are already searching for your brand, or they already have buying intent to buy something. But if you can generate a business which operates off demand generation, which really is for something that's a luxury product or something that's a higher AOV, if you can figure out an ad that works and a campaign that works and scale that ad with the right creatives, then you've got a winning formula. And I think there are a lot of businesses that focus very heavily on the demand capture over the demand generation, and that scale just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So that's where, in my mind, like acquisition is the demand generation focus, which is more paid social than paid search, right? Paid search is almost the end of the funnel.
I think, can we just riff here? Because what typically happens, what I found, and it depends on your sort of finances, appetite for marketing, whether you're sort of allies or not, but usually they'll see, if you look at everything in isolation, all the channels, and like the return on ad spend, anyone doesn't really understand it would be like, why would we not put more money into paid search? And like paid social on click measurement looks atrocious, like why the hell are we spending there? It sounds counterintuitive, but actually the things with the really high return on ad spend are never usually meaningfully helping you to grow your business. Same with like your abandoned cart stuff. Like it's all good to have set up, but those tactics aren't really, like those people probably would have bought anyway, let's face it. But the things that are harder to measure, don't look as good, especially on a click measurement basis. They're the things, in my opinion, that are actually growing market share. It's just harder to get buy-in.
Half the room are sitting here going, how do we measure this, right? Like how can we possibly measure this? I think like a simple way, you take your acquisition by channel and the customers that came in. So if you figure out setup, what customer, with this order that just came in, what was their last click attribution, or what was their first click attribution, however you want to look at it, if you can measure back that far. And then look at that customer's lifetime value and history. So you'll probably find that people who come in through influencers will have a longer lifetime value. People who come in through affiliates have a very short lifetime value. And you might be able to attribute a lifetime value to your customer acquisition cost rather than just look at it on a one-to-one basis.
It's interesting that you say that, because So we measure everything also by customer lifetime value as well, and exactly we look at the cohorts of the different channels and what customer lifetime value they drive. And what I find quite interesting, and like speaking to some of you in the audience earlier, is like that there are some teams that are completely siloed from each other. So the acquisition and the retention team are completely siloed from each other, which to me, they have to work hand in hand. So yes, you can be driving a lot of traffic and maybe you have great cost per acquisitions or low cost per installs, but if that traffic is not driving a high customer lifetime value, maybe is it worth spending your efforts elsewhere and just working better together between the acquisition and the retention teams as well. And interesting about the demand generation, the way I see it is like awareness and direct response, right? So if you completely switch off your awareness campaigns, and as you said, all of those channels that are a bit more harder to measure, will you actually be converting? Because you were talking about remarketing, you need to be driving that traffic there in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And just to count, and apologize, but not all affiliates have low customer lifetime value. As an affiliate company ourselves, content affiliates drive very high customer lifetime value. Maybe discount affiliates,
You're right.
possibly.
You've been counted.
But
You're right.
So before we go into retention, and that is going to be a very controversial topic, would you mind if I ask you, especially for the sole supplier, where your audience is quite broad, have you seen any changes on the channels that a much younger audience could be reached today?
Yes, so certainly our marketing channels, I think, differ massively, kind of the growth marketing channels differ massively to yours. So we see for brand awareness, TikTok is where it's at. Literally 40% of all searches for Gen Z start there. So TikTok is huge for us for awareness. It doesn't work for us as much for pure direct response, but again, you need to be driving that awareness and that traffic to your site and your app. However, again, personally analyzing our own data, TikTok hasn't been great for customer lifetime value. So yes, they might come and buy right here, right now, but there's no loyalty, at least for our own product. Again, look at your own data. I'm not saying that TikTok doesn't work. It works. It just doesn't work necessarily for us. But push notifications for our business are huge. This is it's a retention channel, and this is how it's our biggest growth channel. So what we try doing is funneling all of the traffic that we get from the other marketing channels into making sure that people download the app and enable push notifications and create alerts on our app. And this is where the growth is for us, and this is where we see the highest customer lifetime value.
Very nice. So we've seen a trend now that we're entering this uncertainty, where a lot of companies are focusing much more on engagement, CRM, loyalty, and they decide to diverse funds from acquisition and put them more to retention. What is your approach and your thinking around that, Jake?
Yeah, I think there's potentially quite dangerous, or I keep reading it on LinkedIn constantly saying like retention is the new acquisition, which I find quite frustrating because, again, if you turned acquisition off, like I'd like to, it all works like this symbiotic relationship. So yes, it's important, but it shouldn't it doesn't trump acquisition. But in terms of, for us, we're obviously placing a huge focus on, I'm getting quite excited about direct mail actually for us from a retention point of view. I feel like we've got the email broadcast automation fairly well-oiled, and direct mail now is a sort of brand new incremental channel for the people who already know about us. And we find it's really quite effective of re-engaging the lapsed customers. So is getting an email and a piece of print, does that work better at bringing someone back rather than just an email? And that's something that we're starting to test. I think it's got 100% response. You're gonna people might chuck it in the bin, but at least you definitely will get it as an email, whether it gets delivered or whatnot. And for us, our audience group is sort of 50 plus, female. Like we get so much, even just anecdotally, like response on how much they like to see and feel and touch a catalogue versus you can't really do the same storytelling in a digital medium.
Yeah. How many shoes are too many shoes?
Well, our target audience is quite unique because we call our target audience sneakerheads. So we're very fortunate to know our purchase frequency, and they buy sneakers every month, sometimes more than once a month. So we're very fortunate. I assume that for Piglet in Bed, it's very difficult to pinpoint the exact purchase frequency, which is quite different. But for 18 to 35-year-olds, we are targeting very much a sneakerhead audience that really want to get. We're talking about collectors here that have 500 pairs of sneakers at home. So
right.
Yeah. Wow. So, but inevitably, we have been very much impacted by the cost of living crisis, because again, we're talking about 18 to 35-year-olds. And what we found that was quite interesting in testing is actually tapping into different European markets. So we are finding that the German market and the Dutch market are much more resilient. And that's where we've been focusing in our efforts, and we had to adapt very quickly because our focus has always been the UK, and all of a sudden we've kind of shifted our focus to internationalization, which is something that we've wanted to do in the last kind of couple of years, but now it's given us that push. So I guess crisis can be good because it can perpetuate certain ideas and plans, and you just have to adapt.
Aaron, which camp are you on? Acquisition or retention at the times of uncertainty?
If I was starting a completely new business, right, from day one, the first thing that I would do would be put all of the retention things and the conversion things in place before I then started acquisition, right? And I think that's an important thing for any, I guess, 1 million, 2 million revenue business initially, to make sure that everything in that cycle is done first. Then you can start pumping money into the top of the funnel, because if you can guarantee that the rest of the stuff is going to convert and you already see it without a cost attached to it. So if you know your basket abandoned emails convert and you know your checkout and your welcome flow converts, when you start pumping money into it, you'll be more confident in that lifetime value and the things that go on. So it's one comes before the other. I think people talking about, retention is the new acquisition is probably just a LinkedIn post for the sake of LinkedIn. But it's something that can be easily forgotten about, to not either refresh or keep in mind when you forget and you go, oh, your ads aren't performing. Well, actually, maybe your website's not converting, or your flows aren't converting. So hand in hand.
Good. We're going to go now into the part where we're discussing KPIs and attribution and marketing, mix modeling. But talking about growth, what would be your main metrics that you're interested in at the end of the year that will make you feel satisfied with your marketing campaigns, with all of your efforts, especially given on times of uncertainty?
Revenue and EBITDA.
Okay.
Anything else?
Jake?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to go, before that for me is like traffic and CAC, but obviously which filters down to revenue, much more of a focus on profitability now. But yeah, I'm kind of the gatekeeper, if you like, of there's things we can control to how much traffic can we get to the site, and obviously traffic times conversion times AOV equals sales. So like, how can we affect the channel mix? What do we think it can achieve? How can we affect the on-site conversion? Obviously, my job really is to spend resources as efficiently as possible, spend as much as we can at a profitable first-time order customer acquisition cost. That's kind of like my two things on a pedestal, and hopefully the revenue and the EBITDA should inherently follow if done correctly.
Do you measure any KPIs like returns or customer satisfaction?
We're quite bullish on, we don't have like NPS surveys, but Trustpilot we kind of made a decision quite early on to put our Trustpilot reviews and the service score almost on like a pedestal really with revenue like that, Matt. So we would never really grow at the sake of detrimental Trustpilot reviews, like we're either growing too quick or the product quality is not up to standard. So that's always talked about in board meetings, hand in hand with growth. Like what our customers saying, is the product quality still up to where it should be as we grow in? So yeah, that's kind of our proxy for customer service and like product quality as well.
Maya, coming to you now.
Yeah, so I agree with Jake on the revenue part. For us, the revenue is kind of an outcome of everything else. So in terms of our North Star, we have one North Star metric that is guiding us, which is repeat orders from returning customers, which is very much a retention metric, because we know that if people keep coming back and keep buying through us, we've made it, and EBITDA and revenue will be there inevitably, and the cost per acquisition will be low because they'll be coming back via the retention channel. So for us, CAC is not as clearly it's important, because also, to give you a bit of background, I come from a self-sufficient business, so we're not fortunate enough to have, well, or maybe we're fortunate that we're self-sufficient, but we're not VC backed. So for us, clearly cost per acquisition is important, but only if it drives customer lifetime value and results in returning customers and repeat orders from them in the long term. So that is our kind of measure of...
It's a retention metric.
It is a retention metric. Our North Star metric is a retention metric, because otherwise, to me, we're not doing our job properly, because we're seeing very low CACs again from certain marketing channels, and then a couple of months down the line, when we analyze the cohort, we see spikes of uninstalls and drops of stickiness on our app and so forth from the same cohort. Yes, the CAC was there, but actually they didn't lead to the same purchase frequency of our average customer.
And your customer is not just purchasing once, right? If you're going for people that they have 500 pairs of sneakers, that makes total sense. So you're adjusting for your customer and your business model.
Precisely. So exactly as always. So the truth is in your business, in your business model. That's the truth for our business model. This is what works, and that's our measure of success. But it will be very different for different businesses.
Do you think it's interesting, because something I'd quite like to build, like, so if your retention KPI is falling short, do you think you're able to like diagnose, like, is that something wrong with the retention funnel, or do you think it could be an issue with maybe like the quality of the customers you acquired could be worse? It could be like...
But that's exactly it. That's something that we spotted, that sometimes kind of our acquisition teams say, oh, fantastic, we just achieved a great CAC from this channel, and I'm looking at the cohort, and a couple of months down the line, it's like their stickiness and the return and retention metric is just not working. And I'm like, well, let's adjust the marketing, the acquisition.
So, okay, seems like you all have an agile manner of adjusting your media budgets and your efforts. How frequent does that happen in your businesses?
Readjusting the budget?
Readjusting the budget, changing, reprioritizing channels?
At least weekly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes daily.
Not surprised. But and what would be the benefits and the minuses for that, right? Because sometimes when we do brand building exercises, that takes a while, and daily adjustments might have a negative impact.
The biggest splits, I mean, we're talking about huge investments into large channels. I think when we're talking about reallocating budget, we're talking about digital acquisition allocation of budget, which happens very frequently. I think that's just the nature of the business more than anything. On the larger scale projects, I don't think I'm the best person to answer that question in terms of like the branding side. I think it's very scrappy right now, and I think throughout my time of working career, it's always been very scrappy in startups and new markets. So I'll leave it to somebody else.
Okay, well.
Yeah, I think the same as Alan said, for the digital media buy-in, it definitely is more frequent, like daily, weekly. Although sometimes we found like less is more, like sometimes tampering with too much is counterproductive. So actually just like leave it alone tends to do better. But like, yeah, the bigger scale, we don't do any above the line yet, but like direct mail, for example, that's cold acquisition, or for the house file, that's like an investment that we're committed to like really, I've got to sort of go to my CFO and say, this is the annualized budget for print. Like, need to lock in, so I need to secure a printer. This is this paper stock. We're doing it. So that's like carved out, ready. So you can't really be chopping and changing that. You kind of got to commit in for that. But yeah, I guess the digital stuff, because it's so easy to change. Yeah, we do it very frequently, rightly or wrongly.
For the record, I love print as well.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting how that's come full circle and is becoming a real channel again.
I can't say the same because our target audience doesn't necessarily consume print as much, but I can totally get it. I get the line for yours.
I like mail.
I can see we have a little bit more than a minute, but I wanted to ask you about any innovation plans or any new approaches in digital media, especially now that we have seen these trends, it can be trends, where you have generative content, you have AI that you can take advantage with your data. How do you go about that? Are you doing anything new this year or not?
Yeah. So ChatGPT is very heavily integrated into our business now. We've spent a fair amount of time in the last couple of months building. A lot of our business revolves around landing pages and new landing pages and new ways of writing. But we have built a series of prompts where we input the information in, and then it churns out a landing page with the code, and we can put it in. So we can churn out landing pages in a few hours where it was maybe taking us a couple of weeks with different departments beforehand. So we're trying more than anything that so we can validate a point or validate a test or validate something which we'd not done before. So yeah, it's very much definitely involved in. It's just incredible to see. You just sit in front of something and watch this thing generate, and you have a page faster than anything else. It's still mind-blowing how it all works.
Have you looked into that?
Aaron answers wins. I'm waiting to find someone else doing it, and I can speak to him, so I'll be speaking to Aaron after.
Catch you after, mate.
Very good, Maya.
We are more using AI kind of more for product recommendations, so understanding the purchasing behaviors of our different cohorts and to clearly serve them more, the different profiles of people, different types
Make them buy more shoes.
Products, yeah. There you go.
Very good. James, I think it's time now to open up for questions from the audience.
Hi, I'm Rowan from Loaf. How much, or do you at all see SMS as an opportunity or a growth channel? I know it's used in America quite prolifically, in some places in Europe. It feels like the UK is very reluctant, and I definitely have some skepticism around it, but I'd be curious to see or hear your thoughts.
Maya, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, I'll start with it because clearly push notifications for us are huge. But I guess it really depends, again, on your product and does your customer really want that channel? Because for us, again, our target audience really wants to buy a pair of sneakers that are going to sell out in 3 minutes. So they need to know now. And let's say if you're a ticketing company, again, let's say concerts, you need to know immediately before the tickets sell out. So it makes sense for particular businesses. Do I really want to be getting a text message from a furniture company? I don't know. That's for you to experiment and to, do you see what I mean? So I guess you just have to experiment and test and see, does it work, or do people get annoyed? For our target audience, it works really well because it's just that's how they get the information to get them to the aha moment and to buy the sneakers that they want. So yep. I think it's very different to different companies.
So customer first. Jake, do you agree?
So we use Attentive, you might have heard, after hounding me for numerous years to start doing SMS. I think the jury's still out for the UK, 100%. I mean, I don't know what the stats are, but everyone uses WhatsApp and no one uses, like my iMessage, just a graveyard of verification codes, like everyone uses WhatsApp. US, like there's definitely a headroom for growth, and it's actually playing quite a meaningful part for like traffic and revenue growth, like on-demand messages, like you would copy what you send out on newsletter, and the automation. The UK, we're using it a lot more sparingly because it is pretty invasive. So it's like we wouldn't be doing like weekly or even on-demand sends. Because I think the thing I struggle to try and measure, I think everyone does, is like the cost of pissing people off. Like we only measure
the cost of pissing people off.
we only measure positive outcomes, which is like clicks and revenue, great, but
It's a key KPI.
yeah, I don't know how I need to. Well, my customer service team like tell me if there's like an angry customer, which is like storm in a teacup, but still, it's trying to be like mindful of would I like this as a customer, and like, I mean, yeah, I'm signed up to like Domino's. That's it on text.
I think I've integrated Attentive into, I think, 8 websites in the last 3 years. I'm a big fan of Attentive, and it pays for itself in only the checkout abandon and basket abandon, right? If you sort of even forget the welcome flow and the other things, I've never seen something not pay the, depending on how good a deal you got, depending on when they launched in the UK only a couple of years ago. But you can pay the couple $100 a month fee that they normally charge is more than covered by the retargeting SMS which you get, which somebody puts their number in, they browse, and instead of getting an abandoned email, they get an abandoned SMS, and you can create flows within that. So when you add to that the campaign messages, which I definitely don't recommend sending anything like you would send an email, right? You're talking once a month, maybe twice a month. When something is very relevant and very segmented, then yeah, great. But it's a really nice tool that I've also seen. Once you build up this SMS database, you can create huge spikes because the data out there is something like a 90% open rate on an SMS, right? 90% plus. So you get these huge spikes once you build up these databases, but you need to build up this database with the correct consent, and that is something that takes time. I would argue that you should start it now, and in a year or two from now, you'll have a really successful thing that you could go, we're having a terrible day, let's send them SMS, bang, spike.
And would you consider using the database for other channels like WhatsApp, for example?
I don't have any experience with that now. I don't know. Maybe you can.
Well, we do.
You do?
Because of push notifications and SMS, it makes sense for, again, our audience.
Yes, absolutely. There is a hand over there.
Yeah. You touched briefly on acquisition, speaking about first click and last click. What is your view on data-driven attribution?
I like it. Probably should have said data-driven attribution, shouldn't I? It's great. If you can find something that works for you, cool. I think it's really hard. I think it's maybe impossible.
Yeah, I mean, we're only just like doing the whole GA4 like migration. We're there now. The countdown's on, isn't it, on Universal Analytics? So we're still trying to see, the differences between like obviously like positional, like first touch, last touch, or data driven. Like I really want to try and unlock, because the question's always like, oh, all your money goes into paid social. So can I get some metrics to show everyone like this is performing really well, but still. Fundamentally, it's a bit rudimentary because it's click-based, and we just know that you're consuming media, meta, and you're just not always going to get, I think it's like 90% of people don't even click ads. So even if it's data-driven, I don't believe it's taken view through, is it? It's still click-based, I think.
Does anyone like GA4 more than UA? Cool. Yep, just checking.
Unanimous.
Unanimous.
Amazing. What we haven't touched, talking about growth, is about partnerships. Have you explored that direction about strategic partnerships with other brands, with influencers maybe, or anything else?
We've not done any like brand collaborations. We've worked with some influencers, but not high tier, like big scale ones. We've had a few approaches, but I'd struggle to. It's really hard to like quantify the cost. And, like, is this going to check out? And like, we've yet to take the plunge on any yet.
Well, in a sense, we are the brand partners. So we work with strategic partners with Nike, with Adidas, with New Balance, and also we're considered kind of a macro influencer, and it works for these brands because we are very much a content affiliate, and it makes sense because we are not. There's not an ad in their face. It's all about the content that we create and kind of elevating their brand and the messages that they want further. So I would say that it's working for Nike, Adidas, and New Balance to work for us. So it might be interesting to explore for other brands as well.
Luxury industry, potentially. 500 pair of sneakers, 500 pair of Louboutins. That could be. Aaron?
Not for us at the moment. Not to say that I don't think there's value in it. It's just not for our brand at this point in time. So yes to other brands, maybe not for us.
So we managed to gain back of time, so thanks for sprinting into this room. That was as good as I thought it was going to be, so that was excellent. Let's go and have some lunch, and we'll see you all back a little bit later on. I'm sure my team will go and corral you all at some point later on. Okay, thanks everybody. Cheers, guys.
Yeah.